Voice in the water. If this recording ever reaches you, there are only two possibilities. Either I'm no longer alive, or I'm no longer alone. 2 days ago, my voice sounded normal. Confident. Curious. Controlled. Now, even as I listen to myself speak, I can hear something underneath it. A second breath. A pause that doesn't belong to me. My name is Nora Hale. I'm 28 years old, based in Chicago, and I host a podcast called Dead Signal, a show about forgotten American folklore, urban legends, and stories people swear are just local myths. That's what I thought this was. The email came late on a Sunday night. If you're looking for something real, come to Louisiana. Ask about the widow of Black Cypress Lake. There was no sender name, no follow-up, just coordinates. By Tuesday morning, I was on a plane. Black Cypress Lake sat outside a dying town called Marrow's Edge, tucked deep into southern Louisiana wetlands. The kind of place where the trees leaned inward like they were listening, and the air felt thick enough to swallow sound. I took a taxi from a nearest station. The driver didn't talk much until I told him where I was headed. He glanced at me in the rear-view mirror and frowned. "You podcast folks don't stay long out there," he said. "Why is that?" He shrugged. "They hear enough." He dropped me at the edge of town just as the sun started to dip. Cicadas screamed from the trees, loud and relentless. I dragged my suitcase along a cracked road until I reached the address I'd been given. A narrow, aging house stood near the lake's edge, its wooden porch sagging, paint peeled down to bare boards. Framed black and white photos hung inside the front windows, faces watching the road like they were waiting. That's where Ms. Eleanor Brooks lived. She answered the door before I knocked. Late 50s. Plain clothes. Tired eyes. The kind of woman who smiled like she'd learned not to trust it. "You must be the podcaster," she said. "You can call me Nora." She studied me for a long moment before stepping aside. "Come in before it gets dark." Her house smelled faintly of incense and damp wood. Family photos lined the walls. Weddings, birthdays, people smiling the way people do when they think nothing bad is coming. We ate quietly. Halfway through dinner, she finally asked the question I knew was coming. "What do you know about the widow?" I turned on my recorder. "Only the basics," I said. "A woman drowned in the lake. People say she appears near the water at night." Ms. Brooks' hand tightened around her fork. "That's the tourist version," she said. "The truth is uglier." She gestured toward the window. Through the trees, I could see the lake, a wide, black mirror reflecting the last traces of daylight. "Her name was Clara Whitmore," she continued. "She was married young. Real young. Church wedding. Paperwork and promises. Didn't matter that her husband drank. Didn't matter that he hit her. Folks around here called it marriage." I stayed quiet. "One night, she wore her wedding dress again," Ms. Brooks said. "Said she was making things right. By morning, only the veil was floating on the water." "What happened to her husband?" I asked. Ms. Brooks didn't answer right away. "He left town," she said finally. "But the lake didn't. That night, she warned me not to go near the water alone. Especially after midnight," she said. "And especially if you've ever been married." I smiled and lied. "I haven't." The truth flickered through my mind like a camera flash. A courthouse wedding in Illinois. No family. No rings. A divorce a year later, sealed in paperwork and silence. No photos. No reminders. I told myself it didn't count. At 11:47 p.m., I grabbed my recorder, camera, and flashlight and slipped out of the house. The path to the lake was narrow and uneven, surrounded by tall grass that whispered as I passed. Frogs croaked in the distance. The air smelled like stagnant water and something older. I started recording. "Day 1, I whispered. "I'm at Black Cypress Lake. Locals claim the spirit of a drowned bride appears here, targeting." The flashlight beam hit the water. Perfectly still. Then something shifted. A ripple. Small. Controlled. Like fabric brushing the surface. I focused the light. For half a second I saw white. Lace. Then nothing. "Probably debris," I muttered, though my heart disagreed. Behind me, Something dragged through the grass.
Slow. Heavy.
I spun around. Nothing but trees. When I turned back toward the camera, the lens caught something I didn't see with my eyes, a reflection behind my shoulder. Long, dark hair.
Wet.
I yanked around. Nothing. This is enough for tonight, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort. I hurried back to the house. In my room, I opened my bag to grab the memory card. 2 objects fell onto the white tile floor. A cracked pearl earring, and a strip of yellowed lace. Cold to the touch, like it had been underwater. My breath caught. A knock sounded at the door. Miss Brooks stood there, eyes locked on what lay in my hands. "Where did you get those?" she whispered. "They were in my bag," I said. "I didn't." She snatched them away, wrapping them in cloth and placing them on a small altar near the wall. "You lied to me," she said softly. "I didn't think it mattered." For her, Miss Brooks replied, "It always matters." That night, sleep didn't come easily. When it did, I dreamed of standing at the lake's edge. I was wearing a dress that wasn't mine. In the water, a woman stared back, but she had my face, and she was smiling. I woke up at exactly 3 a.m., heart racing, certain someone was standing in the corner of the room. The corner was empty, but the recorder light was on. Still recording. "The widow knows your name." I stopped trusting silence the moment I realized the recorder had never been turned off. The red light blinked steadily on the bedside table, mocking me. I reached out and pressed stop. The room felt heavier instantly, like something had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. I checked the audio. At first, it was just my breathing. Uneven. Shallow. Then, underneath it, barely audible, was another sound, soft water movement, like fingers trailing across a lake surface. And then a voice. Not loud. Not distorted.
Clear.
"Nora." I shut the recorder off again, harder this time, as if force would erase what I'd heard.
Sleep was impossible after that.
Morning came gray and damp. Fog clung low to the ground, wrapping the house and the lake beyond in a dull, white shroud. Miss Brooks was already awake, standing at the stove with a mug of coffee she wasn't drinking. "You heard her," she said without turning around. I froze. "Heard who?" She faced me slowly. "The widow."
I didn't deny it.
Miss Brooks sat down across from me and folded her hands. Up close, I could see how tired she really was. This wasn't fear in her eyes anymore. It was familiarity. "You don't just record her," she said. "You attract her." "Why me?" I asked. She studied my face like she was looking for something written beneath the skin. "Because you were married," she said. "And because you pretend you weren't." My throat tightened. "She listens for women who erase themselves," Miss Brooks continued. "That's how she finds her way in." By midday, the fog lifted enough for me to see the lake clearly. It looked harmless. That bothered me more than if it hadn't. I spent the afternoon interviewing locals, at least the ones who hadn't slammed doors in my face. Most wouldn't say her name. Some crossed themselves. One older man laughed nervously and told me the lake had been claimed long before the story. Claimed by what? He refused to answer. At a corner store, a woman behind the register glanced at my recorder and said quietly, "You shouldn't stay past tonight." "Why night?" I asked. Her eyes flicked toward the window. "Because tomorrow's the anniversary." "Of Clara Whitmore's death?" She shook her head. "Of the night she stopped being alone." That evening, Miss Brooks took me to a small chapel on the edge of town. No electricity. No official signage. Just candles and the smell of wax and old wood. A man named Pastor Reed waited inside. He looked nervous when he saw me. "She brought you," he said to Miss Brooks. "She brought herself," Miss Brooks replied. He tied a thin red cord around my wrist, his hands trembling. "This isn't protection," he warned. "It's a marker." "A marker for what?" I asked. "So she knows you're claimed by the living," he said. "For now. Don't answer if she calls you by name," he added. "Not out loud. Not in your head." I laughed weakly. "You say that like it's possible." He didn't smile. "That night, I stayed in my room. I locked the door, closed the curtains, left the recorder running but covered the microphone with cloth, like that might make a difference. At 12:58 a.m., the tapping started.
Soft.
Polite. Fingernails against glass. I held my breath. Nora, a voice whispered from the window. It sounded warm, familiar, almost kind. I just want to talk. I stared at the red cord on my wrist and said nothing. The tapping grew slower. He left me too, the voice continued. Just like yours did. My chest tightened. You erased him, she said. I erased mine. Something scraped along the wall, moving toward the door. We're the same, she whispered. You just haven't finished yet. The door handle rattled once. Then footsteps rushed up the stairs. Nora. Ms. Brooks shouted. The noise outside vanished instantly. Ms. Brooks burst into the room, breathless, her face pale. Did you answer her? No, I said. I swear. She nodded, relief flooding her features.
Good.
She tries the first night. Learns your voice. Learns it for what? I asked. Ms. Brooks hesitated. Then she said, to practice. Just before dawn, exhaustion finally pulled me under. I dreamed I was standing in shallow water, my dress heavy, pulling me down. Across from me stood a woman in lace, her face shifting, sometimes Clara's, sometimes Ms. Brooks', sometimes mine. You tell stories, she said. So do I. Hands reached up from beneath the surface.
Dozens of them.
Grabbing. Holding. Stay, the woman whispered. Let me finish living. I woke up screaming. Morning light crept into the room. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then I noticed the damp footprints leading from the window to my bed. Small.
Bare. Wet.
On the bedside table, next to my recorder, lay a single pearl earring, identical to the one I'd found the night before. And beneath it, scratched faintly into the wood, was a word written backward.
Stay.
I picked up the recorder with shaking hands and pressed play. My voice filled the room. But I didn't remember saying these words. If you're hearing this, the recording said, then she's closer than she should be. Behind my voice, I heard water. And another breath. Not mine. The lake doesn't forget. Continuation and ending. By the third night, the town had stopped pretending nothing was wrong. Doors stayed shut long before sunset. The diner closed early. Even the cicadas seemed quieter, as if the wetlands themselves were waiting. From the porch, I could see Black Cypress Lake clearly now, no fog, no illusion. Just dark water, smooth and patient. Ms. Brooks sat across from me, twisting a rosary through her fingers. She hadn't slept. Neither had I. She's done waiting, she said. For what? I asked, though part of me already knew. For you to decide. I laughed weakly. Decide what? Ms. Brooks looked at me with something close to pity. Whether you're going to keep telling her story or become it. The anniversary hit at midnight. That was when the lake changed. The surface began to ripple in slow, deliberate circles, as though something beneath it was breathing. Candles lit by townspeople along the shoreline flickered violently, even though there was no wind. Pastor Reed arrived just before 11, carrying a leather-bound book he refused to open near the water. She's strongest tonight, he said. But so is the truth. What truth? I asked. That she was never just one woman, he replied. The red cord on my wrist burned. I raised my recorder. If I'm doing this, I said, I'm documenting everything. Pastor Reed hesitated. Once you record her fully, he warned, she won't need the lake anymore. Ms. Brooks met my eyes. That's the point. At 11:58 p.m., the water broke. A figure emerged slowly, not climbing out, but rising, as if the lake were giving her back piece by piece. Wet lace clung to her frame. Her hair streamed behind her like ink in water. She wasn't decayed. She was preserved. Her face shifted as she stepped onto the shore. Sometimes Clara Whitmore. Sometimes a stranger. Once, just once, my own reflection stared back at me. Nora, she said gently. The sound of her voice didn't echo. It settled. I didn't come to take you, she continued. I came to be heard. My hands shook as I raised the microphone. You've been heard for decades, Pastor Reed said sharply. You've taken enough. She turned her head toward him, eyes dark and ancient. I took nothing that wasn't already discarded. The ground beneath us trembled. She didn't kill them, Ms. Brooks said quietly. She replaced them. The women who vanished were already erased long before the water touched them. The widow smiled. Yes, she whispered. They came empty. I gave them weight. My recorder crackled. Voices layered over one another. Women speaking at once, telling fragments of lives interrupted.
Courtrooms. Kitchens.
Hospital rooms. Silence after screams that no one answered. I dropped to my knees, overwhelmed. She wants to live through stories, Ms. Brooks said. Not bodies. That's what changed. The widow stepped closer. The lake pulled at her feet, reluctant to let go. You have a voice, she said to me. You travel. You're listened to. Her hand hovered inches from my chest. Let me speak through you. Pastor Reed shouted. Don't listen. She's lying. No, the widow said calmly. You're afraid because stories make gods unnecessary.
She turned back to me.
You erased your marriage, she said. You thought it made you safe. The red cord snapped on my wrist. I stood. I won't disappear for you, I said, voice shaking but loud. And I won't let you disappear anyone else. Her expression softened. Then don't, she replied. Tell us. The lake stilled. Every eye turned to me. I pressed record. And I spoke. I told Clara's story, but not as a ghost tale. I told it as abuse, as silence, as towns that looked away. I told the stories of women whose names never reached headlines, whose deaths were filed as accidents, whose lives were footnotes. The widow's form flickered with each word, her shape less solid, more like light bending in water. Yes, she whispered. That's how. Pastor Reed stepped back, horrified. You're breaking the boundary. No, Ms. Brooks said, tears in her eyes. She's closing it. The lake began to glow faintly, not red or violent, but warm. The candles burned steady. The widow smiled one last time. Now they will hear us, she said. And she dissolved, not sinking, not vanishing, but dispersing into the sound of my voice. The water went still. Morning came quietly. Black cypress lake looked ordinary again. Pastor Reed was gone. No footprints. No explanation. The town said he'd left before dawn. Ms. Brooks drove me to the station. You'll keep recording, she said. Yes. And you won't come back? I shook my head. She smiled sadly. Good. On the train, I listened to the audio. My voice played back clearly until the end. After my final words, another layer surfaced. A chorus.
Soft.
Grateful. If this recording reached you, a voice said, overlapping mine, then you're listening. I checked the recorder. It was still recording, and the red light never turned off. Some stories don't end. 3 weeks after leaving the town, I stopped sleeping through the night. At first, it was just small things. Waking up at 3:12 a.m. for no reason. Hearing water running in my apartment when every faucet was dry. Seeing my own reflection blink a fraction of a second too late. I told myself it was stress. I uploaded the episode anyway. The response was immediate. Downloads surged overnight. Comments flooded in. People said the story felt too real. A few claimed they'd dreamed about the lake without ever seeing a picture of it. One message stood out more than the rest. She's quieter now, but she's not gone. The account was deleted minutes later. I tried to move on. I stopped recording new episodes. Took a break from true horror. Focused on editing old content. Safe content. Nothing about folklore. Nothing about water. Nothing about women in white dresses. Still, every night at 3:12, my phone vibrated. No notification. No missed call. Just vibration, 3 short pulses. Always the same rhythm. One night, I finally answered. The line was open. No breathing. No static. Then a voice layered over another voice. And another. Not screaming.
Calm.
We're still here. I dropped the phone. When I picked it up again, the call log was empty. The next morning, a package sat outside my apartment door. No return address. Inside was my old recorder, the same one I'd used at the lake. I knew I'd left it on the train platform. I remembered watching it disappear under the seat as the doors closed. I remembered telling myself to buy a new one. The recorder was damp. When I pressed play, I heard my own voice, but older, strained, like I'd been speaking for hours. If this reaches you, it said, then I didn't leave alone. I shut it off. That night, I dreamed of the lake again. But this time, I wasn't standing at the shore. I was beneath the surface. The water didn't burn my lungs. It didn't feel cold. It felt heavy, like hands resting on my shoulders, keeping me still. Above me, dozens of faces stared down through the water.
Some were young.
Some old. Some looked like me. They weren't angry. They were waiting. I woke up gasping, my sheets soaked as if I'd been pulled from a bath. My wrists hurt. Thin red marks circled them. Not tight enough to bruise, but clear enough to see. The next day, I received an email from a university folklore department in another state. They'd listened to the episode and wanted permission to archive it. They said it documented something rare. A living transmission. They asked one question at the end. Did the voice change after you left? I never replied. Because that night, while brushing my teeth, I heard someone speak from behind me. Not aloud. Inside my head. Tell it right this time. I looked into the mirror. For a moment. Just one. My reflection wasn't alone. There were others standing close behind it, their shapes overlapping mine, their eyes calm, patient. Then the lights flickered, and I was alone again. I still have the recorder. I still wake up at 3:12. And sometimes, when I open my podcast app, I see a draft episode uploaded under my name. No title. No description. Just a waveform already moving. I haven't pressed play yet. But if you're hearing this, it means I finally did. And it means the story didn't end at the lake. It just found a better microphone.